What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 37 preview, the penultimate preview, of course. I just say that in every single video this week, where I go through your questions and topics ahead of the deadline on Sunday. There's a hell of a lot to get through, so I'm going to jump straight into it. We have to talk about Kevin De Bruyne, not just the question that's come in. So is it worth going for him, especially if we have an easy route to him, or has the train left the station? Right? I.e., can he do what he's just done? Have we missed the halls now? Is he going to continue to be a good player for the rest of the season, the last two game weeks that we have? So first of all, the 4 goals. An incredible double game week 36. 30 points, 60 if you captained him, 90 if you triple captained him. Absolutely ridiculous. If you triple captain Kevin De Bruyne, you have more points from that one player this week than I have for my entire team. So I've checked the top 10. There's a lot of people in there with some huge scores now. This is a big moment in your FPL season. Fair play if you had him. If you didn't have him, it absolutely sucks, especially if you were, especially people on free hit, maybe you had him and you switched to Son or something like that. That really sucks. I don't really have a good coping mechanism for that. It does affect people differently. I guess stepping away from FPL is always a good option if, that kind of hurt you, your mini league's lost or whatever it is. In terms of has the train left the station, in my opinion, the way I would look at it is you weigh Kevin De Bruyne up if you're thinking about bringing him in for the last 2 game weeks, just as you would if he'd blanked in game week 36, right? Scoring 4 goals in one game does not happen very often at all. He could now go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games before he scores again. Very unlikely, I know, but it could happen. That is football. Freak events occur. So if I'm looking at him as a heavy hitter versus other heavy hitters to possibly bring in this week, I know a lot of people already own Salah, but let's use him as an example. If I'm looking at De Bruyne with West Ham away and Villa at home, and Salah's got Southampton away and Wolves at home, Wolves who just conceded 5 goals to Man City, by the way, everything in isolation, I would say that Salah is the better option, okay? Despite what's happened with his form recently since African Cup of Nations and stuff like that, I would still back Salah. His goal threat is generally much higher than Kevin De Bruyne's, and I would expect him to get a higher score. Of course, you need to put some context around that and say, well, okay, Salah might play 120 minutes in the FA Cup, which we will know before the deadline. If the league is gone by game week 38, he could miss some minutes against Wolves. Kevin De Bruyne, it's unlikely for that to happen. So you could weigh that in favour of De Bruyne. If you're then looking at De Bruyne versus Son or Kane, then I think it's much more tricky because I think all 3 of those players start both games, and I would argue that Spurs fixtures, Burnley at home and Norwich away, are better than West Ham away and Villa at home, which De Bruyne has, right? Villa put up a pretty good fight against Liverpool. They caused them some problems. I'm sure they'll cause Man City some problems. And I also think West Ham away, despite them having nothing to play for anymore, really, I mean, they could still get a few league positions, etc. But, I think the European thing was probably quite devastating, but they still came and smashed Norwich, right? They will probably line up in a low block and try and cause Man City problems. Man City are good enough. I'm sure they'll get through it. I'm sure they'll win the game. Is it going to be another 5-goal thriller like they had against Wolves and Newcastle? I would argue probably not. So in my eyes, De Bruyne hasn't suddenly become a much better option because of what happened yesterday. I think ultimately, and this is kind of going back to how you deal with these things, you have to accept there's some luck in FPL. And I don't want to get into a skill versus luck debate. There's plenty of skill in selecting players in FPL, but once they go out on the pitch, there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes the likes of Kevin De Bruyne will go and score 4 goals. Sometimes they'll have those same 4 shots and they'll only score once, twice. Maybe sometimes they'll miss out completely, and you'll be saying after the game, how has Kevin De Bruyne come? How many times have you said that? How has this player not got me any points? Imagine how many times we've said that, because not every time the ball goes in the net when you expect it to. So I don't really see him as a better option. To give you an idea, he scored 4 goals from less than 1 XG last night. And again, XG is not perfect in that if you have 1, you definitely score a goal, okay? You could get 4 XG over 4 games and not score at all, and then go and score 4 in 1 game, right? But the idea is he probably has overperformed a little bit this season because he scored 15 goals from 5.8 XG. At some point, either he's going to have to get more quality chances to keep up that amount of goals, or the amount of goals he's getting is going to have to come down. And again, XG is not perfect. I can't tell you when that downtrend of goals will be. But what I'm trying to say is last night doesn't make him a better option in 37. Again, you put context around it. His minutes are good. He's probably going to start. Man City need to win. They obviously score lots of goals anyway. They're all good things. None of that is new from last night, right? So do I think he's a good option? Yes. I might even put him on my free hit, but I was considering that before this week. So like I said, last night's not changed anything. If it's between him, Son and Kane, bearing in mind Son and Kane played tonight, they might get injured or something like that. Take that into account, of course. I still think I would pick Son over De Bruyne. I just want to tack a little bit more onto the end here because there's one thing I wanted to mention about De Bruyne that I didn't do. I know sometimes, like if someone like me, like a different content creator, sits here and says a player maybe got a little bit lucky or maybe they did overperform a lot, some people, especially those that own the player, kind of almost take offense to that as if like, I made a really good pick. You cannot say that's lucky. But I think you just make your life easier in FPL if you just accept that you can have both things. So you can definitely say you made a great pick with Kevin De Bruyne. He had 2 good fixtures, good double game week, big differential, ability to score points. Of course, Man City score a lot of goals. All those things can be true. It can also be true that there was a little bit of luck involved in how many points you got. And I think that is really important when you're assessing players that, you know, if you're not an owner, if you're not a De Bruyne owner, that should definitely come into your thinking when you think about buying him. For example, right, I had Son instead of Kane, so I'm just looking at his points. From 30, 31 and 32, he got 15, 12 and 21 points. I would consider myself a little bit lucky that he got 6 goals in 3 games. And then I sold him and he blanked twice in a row, right? On another day, he blanks when I own him, I sell him, and then he goes and bangs those points in. These things happen in FPL. We just have to accept it. Lives are much easier once you do that. So I'm going to answer this question quickly because I don't actually know if Laporte is going to be injured for the weekend. I didn't see anything that ruled him completely out. I know he went off injured against Wolves, but it doesn't mean he's not going to be fit for the weekend. And I think given the amount of injuries they've got, they'll probably do everything they can to make sure that he plays if it's possible. But obviously this could just be for anyone that's looking to make a defender change. So let's talk about some of the replacements. So double game week wise, I think I wouldn't really touch Burnley. I don't think I'd be bringing in Leicester defenders either. So really, it's probably, and I think the same for Crystal Palace because I know Man United have been really bad. But you could see Man United scoring on the final day, right? And then the other 2 games are both away for Palace. So I think I would ignore those 3 double game week teams. So I'd probably be looking at Villa or Everton. So you got Luka Dean or Matt Cash. I know that people are kind of really put off Luka Dean because of what's happened, like most, not even just this season, but previous seasons. A lot of people see him as a troll. But I do think he's the slightly better attacking option out of him and Cash, despite what happened in game week 28. And this week they got 2 really good fixtures. Crystal Palace at home and Burnley at home. A lot will depend on whether you also have to play this player in game week 38, so keep an eye on that as well, because just because you're replacing them with Laporte maybe or a different defender doesn't mean that you also have to play them in game week 38. And obviously if you do, then take that into account because that might add an extra transfer later on. But if you can bench them, even better. Mikalenko or kind of any Everton defender, maybe Coleman instead as well, are definitely options. Brentford at home and Crystal Palace at home. I've spoken about this on my free hit videos. I just think Villa defence is better than Everton anyway, but also Burnley at home I think is a better fixture than Brentford at home, and obviously they both play Crystal Palace. So if I had to go for one, it would probably be Villa defence for the double, but Mikalenko and Everton do have a slightly better fixture in game week 38 if you're going to be forced to play them that week. Then really I think you're looking at single game weekers, so you're looking at Trent Alexander-Arnold or any Liverpool defender. You could argue it's not a great time to bring them in, right? They'll probably beat Southampton. Could Southampton score in that game? Possibly, but also Trent had a rest, now Robertson's had a rest. Could it be back to Trent after the break? Possibly, especially now Man City have won again. Like, it's going to be very difficult for Liverpool to obviously win the league at this point. But if you don't own Liverpool, fine. If you don't own any other City players, then Cancelo is always a good option. But obviously, if Laporte ends up being out, then he's missing, Diaz is missing, Walker's missing, etc. Might not be the best time to jump on the Man City defence. Again, I'm sure they'll score plenty of goals, but defensively, if they've got Fernandinho as a centre-back, not necessarily ideal. Then you're looking at single game week players. So you've got possibly Gabriel or a different Arsenal defender. Newcastle away, Everton at home is pretty decent. I kind of like just backing Spurs, to be honest. I think there's 2 possible clean sheets there for them. Burnley at home, Norwich away. Like Royale, Emerson Royale or Sessegnon are probably the 2 you want. I think I would just back the wing backs to get some attacking returns. We'll have to wait and see about Reguilon, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be out for the season, and we know Doherty is as well. And Conte is kind of stuck with Emerson Royale, who's actually played a bit better recently, I think, and Sessegnon there. So I think if I wasn't going to go for a double game weeker, because I was worried about playing him in game week 38 and I didn't think they were going to get clean sheets in 37, Emerson Royale or Sessegnon is probably where I would go. Obviously, the obvious choices like, Liverpool, Man City players, fair enough, but there are some slight caveats with them. Maybe Chelsea defenders as well. Reece James and Alonso have Leicester at home and Watford at home, 2 really good fixtures, but the problem is, FA Cup final, could there be some rotation against Leicester, especially when it looks pretty likely that Chelsea have top 4 wrapped up. So with all those caveats and all those possible issues with the other defenders, I think Spurs defence looks pretty good. Right, I did talk about Salah on the transfer tips video, but I'm going to really quickly go through it again because a lot of people tweeted me about him. Like this one, I'm thinking about transferring Salah out. For me, it all comes down to your expectations over minutes. Do you think he's going to start against Southampton away? Now, I already explained in the other video the caveats around or the issues, potential issues that they're playing that FA Cup final. Now, we will know the result of that FA Cup final. We will know who's got injured, how many minutes players have played before the deadline. And obviously, if Salah has had to go and play 120 minutes, maybe he is worth transferring out. But I would question, in most people's teams, how much of a priority Salah out is. Now, I know he's very expensive, and look, if you wanted to go from Salah to Son, I don't think it's necessarily a bad option. I think Salah to De Bruyne is a little bit knee-jerk personally, but if you think there's a genuine chance of Salah getting benched, there's a lot of money on the bench. There's nothing to say that he'll get 90 minutes 100% guaranteed in game week 38 either. You could make the move, but again, I would argue that in most people's teams, he is probably not going to be the priority transfer. And if he starts against Southampton, despite all the form worries that people suddenly have, that is a good fixture, and I probably would want to keep him. Okay, some people are going to see my answer to this as a little bit knee-jerky. I do want to point out that I did mention Jamie Vardy as a possible differential over Harry Kane earlier this week. I'm not saying that I called it and that I was the one that said Vardy was brilliant, because we all know how good he is, right? But it was something I was thinking about before his couple of goals against Norwich. So is he worth considering? He scored a brace, so his form seems like it's bad. It's not really a form thing here. He just had a really good fixture, which is Norwich. He's about to have another really good fixture, which is Watford. He doesn't have Europe anymore, and obviously he's back from injury. So you could say form, but I think it's just all those other things kind of building up. And we know his quality. That much is true, and I definitely agree with that. The issue here is minutes, okay? He played against Norwich because he didn't play against Everton, and there is a chance that the Watford game, which is the first one in game week 37, he will get rested for again, and then he'll play the Chelsea game. Now, obviously, double game week, he could come on against Watford and get something. He could get 80 to 90 minutes against Chelsea and come away with something. But let's be real. No matter what goals Chelsea have conceded recently, the Watford game is the one we want him to play in. So do I think he's worth considering? Yes, especially on a free hit. I think if we get news that he is starting against Watford, I will probably go for him as a differential over Harry Kane, partly because my rank is just red arrow at the moment. But I just think that is kind of like one of the differentials I can see on free hit. And if he plays 80 to 90 against Watford and then gets 20 to 30 minutes against Chelsea, I would probably take that as a punt over Harry Kane. If I was transferring him in, I'd maybe be a little bit more worried, because if he misses Watford so that he's fit, and because obviously he has come back from an injury, right? I know he's played a few games now, but it's not been that long since he was out. If he misses Watford to play Chelsea, does he definitely start the last day of the season against Southampton? So for me, on free hit, if we get word that he's starting against Watford, good differential option. As a transfer in, I think maybe it's just a little bit too risky because of his minutes. Let's see what Brendan Rodgers says. Personally, I don't think he's going to get questioned too much on Vardy's fitness or anything like that. But if he says something that makes us think that he could start back-to-back games, then fair enough. But I think it would worry me just a little bit, just because he's been out for so long. So if I bring up the fixtures, they play 15th of May, this Sunday, obviously. Then they play Thursday on the 19th. Then the Southampton game is only 3 days later. I just think there's almost no chance that he starts all 3 of these games. So which one is he going to miss? He could miss 2 of them. And I mean, he'll probably come on, but I think starts are looking tricky. So if I had however much money he is, like 10.3 million, I'd probably try and stretch to someone like Harry Kane, or maybe just go for a cheaper option and put the money in midfield instead. But on free hit, let's keep an eye out on his potential start against Watford. Okay, another Salah question very quickly. Is Salah essential on a free hit? I'm free hitting in 37. It seems like a big risk not to have him. Try and reframe the way you think about it. Stop thinking about risk, right? Because then people start thinking, well, he's highly owned, so I have to own him. You're on a free hit. That's almost differential in itself. Is Salah, for that money, the best option? Or is it De Bruyne? Or is it Kane? Or is it Son? That's the only question you should have. And again, it's all going to come down to minutes. I've spoken enough about that at this point. I can't guarantee you that Salah's going to play. What I will say is if I think he's going to play, he will almost certainly be on my free hit. Okay, so another free hit question. What free hit differentials are worth a punt? They're thinking of the likes of Vardy, Buendia and Ings. Let me give the boring answer first of all. The free hit is a differential in itself, right? We all know that at this point. So you don't have to go completely different in lots of different positions to get a decent score and a decent rank rise. There is obviously a few spots probably up for grabs where you can go different. We're going to talk about them in a sec. But just worth keeping that in mind. And also, it's not just the free hit week where you necessarily get the gain. So for example, in game week 36, because I was free hitting in 37, that kind of swung me more towards Nketiah and Ederson instead of Schmeichel and Richarlison. Now, I'm not massively up on that, right? It's only like maybe 5-6 points depending on what Nketiah does tonight, but my free hit in 37 has already gained me a few points before I've even used it this week. So that's worth bearing in mind. But let's talk about the differentials. One thing I think is difficult this week is there's only 3 forward spots, and a lot of the kind of really good options like that aren't differentials are the likes of Richarlison, who's going to take up a spot, one of the Aston Villa forwards. Some people even might want both Watkins and Ings if Watkins is fit. And suddenly then you're looking at the likes of maybe Jimenez against Norwich, Vardy obviously for the double, Kane as well, and even Edouard, right? Because I don't think Zaha can go down as a differential. I think most people are going to own him. So if you're looking at maybe a different Crystal Palace player, you could look at Edouard possibly and hope that he keeps his place in the team. But even that's not a guarantee. And the same with Mateta or anyone like that. So I think the forward spot is actually quite hard to take a punt on. But I do think Danny Ings and Jamie Vardy will be players that are not very highly owned outside of free hits. And whether or not Watkins is injured or not, if Villa are going to keep up with this 2-striker formation, obviously if he's not fit they probably won't, but if he is fit and they keep up with this 2-striker formation, Ings should get pretty decent minutes. The one thing to say, and I know that I spoke to or FPL Villain tweeted me to say that I think, you know, Gerrard has realised this is the way to play this team with 2 up front. There's still nothing to say that there might not be something that happens in a game where he decides that's not the right option there. And I think I'd always be a little bit sceptical about players like Ings who haven't been nailed for a lot of this season suddenly being nailed. But we are talking about differentials, and I do think he's a good option. He will be on penalties as well when he's on the pitch. He doesn't very rarely get to 90 minutes, which would worry me a little bit. And it's worth saying, before Watkins got injured, the plan apparently, according to the commentators, was to take Ings off and not Watkins. So Watkins does have the minutes. But again, we're talking about differentials, so I do really like Danny Ings, and he is in my free hit draft as it stands. Vardy I've already talked about quite a bit on this video, so I won't go through it again. But if he starts that Watford game, I really like him as a differential this week. I know Everton didn't really do what I was expecting against Watford and score a few goals against quite a heavily changed team, but I think Leicester are a better side. Jamie Vardy is probably a better attacker than anyone at Everton, and therefore I like him. Edouard, I've put him on just to get a different differential in there. I don't particularly like him. I think that really is just massive differential punt for the sake of it. Kane and Son is definitely a differential. I know there's people without a free hit that will own both, but a lot of people are still kind of stuck with Salah and one of Kane or Son, not both. So that is a differential in itself. Jimenez I was going to put on here because it's Norwich at home. But again, I just think it's too difficult to justify him ahead of the double game week forwards and the likes of Harry Kane, so I didn't put him on. But if you wanted to target that Norwich game, you could go for Neto. Again, I personally think there's a lot of really good midfielders that should probably be in our team ahead of Neto, but we're talking differentials. And then lastly, keep an eye on that Liverpool lineup in the FA Cup. If for some reason there's a tactical reason why Klopp starts Jota and maybe benches one of Mane or Diaz, I don't think that's going to happen, right? But I'm just talking ahead of the match. If that does happen, then whoever misses out from that Liverpool side side, you would imagine, not guaranteed, but they will probably start against Southampton. And if you are looking to go a little bit different, like Southampton just feels like a team that at any point could concede quite a few goals, and Liverpool are definitely a team that can score a lot of goals almost at will. So I think going for, even if you have Salah, a second Liverpool attacker could be decent. I've put Jota on here because I assume he will be the one to miss out on the final, but who knows? Let's wait and see what happens. So I left Coutinho out of the transfer tips video on purpose because I've spoken about him a lot in recent weeks, but questions still coming around him. What do we do with Coutinho, especially considering he might not start both games in 37 and he plays City in 38. So he did miss one of the games in the double in 36. He actually played the Liverpool game. I'm sure people would have preferred it the other way if he'd played Burnley instead. The short answer to this is, if you've got like a really good move you can make, maybe you're bringing in Zaha, you think is going to start both games in the double almost guaranteed, then as Man United last day, or if you've got the money to go to like a Son or like a De Bruyne or a Salah, or maybe you want to take a punt on Jota, for example, who we just talked about, they are possibly all good moves. But I think the reality is Coutinho definitely starts one of these games, and I think there's a good chance, not a definite chance, that he could start both of them, because it depends whether you think he was dropped because of recent performances or if it was just the rest because of the amount of fixtures in quick succession. It would worry me slightly that it was the first game of the double. I think if he'd missed Liverpool, I would have put it down to, okay, fair enough, that's right in the middle of kind of four games in quick succession. Liverpool's the most difficult one. Just rest him for that and have him ready for the rest. I think if that had happened, I'd be more confident on that. So if you think he misses one, I think it's fair game to sell him. But again, it comes down to priorities. And I think there is a chance that he plays twice. There's a chance that he starts one, comes off the bench in the other one, and therefore probably gets like 90 to 110 plus minutes. So he could be worth keeping. It's all going to come down to what other fires essentially you've got to put out. I don't think he would be high up my list of transfers out this week, but obviously he does play City in 38, so you are probably going to have to bench him or move him on in 38. So if there's a move that benefits you for both weeks, you could just bring that forward. I think I said that last week as well. So when is the best time to use triple captain? Salah game week 26 and De Bruyne game week 36. Right, they are the two best times. But look, if you haven't done that now, like me, by the way, I didn't triple captain either of those players. You're still looking. So Son on the final day is very tempting, or should we go with a double game week player instead? I do think because of the quality of the double game week players, you can make a case to just use it on the last day in a single game week instead, especially when Son and Kane have got Norwich. Like, I think if anyone, I know it's always very easy to make the obvious calls, but if you're putting money on a game with lots of goals the final day of the season, Spurs versus Norwich has got to be one of them. So I think if you're keen to keep it for that, I don't really see too much of an issue with that. I always prefer to put it on a double game week player, but obviously you've missed a lot of the big hitters at this point. I think if you're going to, I think Richarlison, I can't believe I'm saying this, I think Richarlison is the safest double game week option left. Just because of Ings' potential minutes, just because of Coutinho's potential minutes, is Watkins injured? Those are the kind of players I'd look at. Maybe Jamie Vardy, but again, if you're not sure that he starts against Watford, that does become punt territory then. I don't really like most of the other Leicester attackers either. I mean, Maddison could do well if he starts against Watford, of course, but I don't think I would look at him as triple captain material. So for me, it really comes down to, are you happy to take a punt? You could call Ings, Watkins, etc. a punt if you wanted to, or go for Richarlison. I just think he's a little bit safer because of penalties and minutes, but even him, I'm not necessarily fully convinced, but I think he probably is the best option in game week 37 is what I'm trying to say. If you are not confident, if you've got like a gut feeling or an inkling that he is just not a good option, then save it, right? I don't think the gap is that big just because of the quality of Kane and Son, right? The only thing is, I think we go into that final day and we're expecting we're almost 100% expecting Son and Kane to haul in that game, get another 15 plus pointer, and obviously it might not happen. So I'm always a fan. I think if I had my triple captain left, I would put it on Richarlison because I always want to back the double game week, and I do think there's a little bit of a higher chance of him outperforming just because he's got kind of two bites of the cherry. But if you're not keen on it at all, you don't like any of the other double game week options, I do think the triple captain works better on single game weekers in 38 instead of the single game weekers that are on offer in 37. So there we go. I feel like we answered a lot in that one, but I probably still missed out a bunch of stuff. So what I'm going to do, team selection will be be tomorrow. I want to wait until the game week's done because I want to see how bad my red arrow is, because I only own Nketiah and Saka for the Spurs-Arsenal game, and obviously Saka might miss out. So let's see what happens. So I want to do team selection tomorrow. That will be looking at my latest free hit draft, because I am probably going to... I've still not activated the chip, but I'm probably going to be on free hit this week. I'm going to do a video on Saturday as well. Let me know below if there's anything in particular you want. I'm going to try and do one for Saturday anyway. I've got an idea for something a little bit different, but if there's big news in the press conference, I might do like a final thoughts video over Friday night or Saturday instead, and then Sunday will be the deadline stream. It's a 10:30 deadline, so there's not going to be another video on Sunday. It's just going to be that deadline stream. So that is the plan. Thank you very much for continuing to support me this season. Obviously, we head into game week 38 next week, the final week of the season. If you have been enjoying all these videos, please do keep giving them a like. It really does help. I know every YouTuber says that, but it really does. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.